So I want to start with this. This is a cliff in Brazil that's really popular with the Instagram generation. They get these incredible shots. And frankly, I wouldn't be this big a daredevil myself. Do you think these two work out? You know, this pose, I have to be honest, really bothers me. Do you think this guy does yoga? Like, I can't believe they do this. And here's the one that bothers me the most, right? Now, this next photograph I'm going to show you might change your perspective. So apparently it takes you a whole hour to hike up the mountain to get to this point, and then another entire hour to get your photograph. There's so many millennials lined up to get their Instagram shot, right? So the question is, why would I begin with this? Because it's about a frame. How I see a situation determines my reaction, and my reaction determines my strategies, and my strategies determine my consequences or outcomes. And this applies as much to me personally as it does organizationally. Stephen said, we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. So my question is, who's closest to the future? The 65-year-old CEO who has their assistant print out all their emails, or the 18-year-old who's on Tinder? Who does Tinder? You're right. Who does all the strategic planning? Who is most disenfranchised from strategic planning? Is it any wonder we only get incremental change? Now, I don't want to be ageist. I don't want to suggest just because you have gray hair or no hair, you can't change the world. When he was CEO of General Electric, Jack Welch was voted the best CEO by other CEOs in the world. But he knew nothing about the internet. So he had the humility to have some 20-somethings come in and mentor him every week on what is the internet. It's called reverse mentoring. Do you have a reverse mentor? There's been a decade of change in just 2.5 years. In December of 2019, Zoom had 10 million daily users. And then the pandemic hit, and it was downloaded 300 million times. I feel like Dr. Evil. 300 million times in just 90 days. So my question to you is, how many companies do you know that grew their customer count 30x on a big base during the pandemic? The only way you can grow that exponential, rocket to the moon growth is if you align with powerful trends, powerful forces. I was in Nepal with my wife in 1998, beautiful country. And I wanted to make a phone call back to Canada, where I live in Toronto. And at the time, it was 300 Nepalese rupees. But I went into an internet cafe, I put on a headset like this, and I made what we call a VoIP call, voice over internet protocol, for 10 rupees. Okay, so 300 rupees, 10 rupees. I predicted all long distance would be free by 2005. Now, at the time, I had some telco clients. Imagine, as a telco client, 70% of your profit in 1998 is from long distance, and you bring in this consultant who says it's all going to be free. What do you think? This guy's an idiot. Who brought him in, right? So let's actually look at what happened. You do not see VoIP, which is the little red, until 2005. We had Skype launch in 2003, so my prediction was 2 years off. But let's look at what happened after 2005. The insight number one is disruption is there all along, but you just can't see it. It's below the radar. And then, boom, we see a rapid rise of VoIP, and then in 2016, it overtakes traditional long distance. Now, on the left, you'll see the scale is in billions of minutes, okay? So that's 1,100 billion. This will be exactly the same graph, but now in trillions of minutes, okay? I'm going to now show you what Zoom did in 2020. So insight number two is it's below the radar for a long time, but once we all have technology and bandwidth and then the pandemic hits, you can have a second disruption. So this is the CEO of IBM, and he said in July that only 20% of IBM's US workers are in the office for 3 days or more. So what's the impact? What's the consequence on commercial real estate? Do you know, pre-pandemic, there was 95% occupancy of commercial real estate in the US, and then the pandemic hit and it went to 10%. And just last month, it was up at 47%. It's still half. And do you know what the consequence of that is? 493, my second Dr. Evil moment. $493 billion lower value of commercial real estate in the US alone. Industries are having to deal with this. What about retail? We had 10 years of e-commerce growth in the first 90 days of the pandemic. A decade of growth in 90 days. And this is the value of Amazon. You can add these 8 retailers up together, Walmart, Target, Best Buy. You can read them all, and you multiply by 3, and it just equals Amazon. So if you don't think e-commerce is going to change retail, I beg you to look at this slide again. UBS, the Swiss analyst firm, says that 100,000 US retail locations will permanently close because of the shift to online. Do you know that Uber is worth more than every single taxi cab in the US combined? So while the taxi industry owns billions of dollars of assets in the form of taxis and limousines, Uber doesn't own a single vehicle, and yet it's worth more. This teaches me that a widely distributed app has incredible value in multiplying the value of your business. What percentage of your sales are mobile, i.e. smartphone? This is the consequence of not innovating. The largest yellow taxi cab market in the US was New York City. Look at what Uber and Lyft did to it. And during the pandemic, you can see the crash in all transportation, but yellow cabs fell to 5% market share. 5%. So from the largest industry being crushed by 95%. So Uber and Lyft and other ride-hailing services hit 95% market share during the pandemic. And if you wanted to drive a cab, you had to buy a medallion. The price of medallions went from 1.1 million down by 90%. So the consequence of ignoring disruption can be ruinous to an industry. Now, I've worked with CEOs of cab companies, and they've said to me, Jim, we're spending $250,000 developing an app for the smartphone. And I go, good for you. You know, the reason I got this is to download 20 Toronto taxi apps and key my data into each one with my fat thumbs. I don't think so. But I don't just work in Toronto. I'm here in Vancouver and Shenzhen and Stockholm. You know, am I going to download 20,000 taxi apps globally? No, the industry has to think at a meta level. If all 20,000 cab companies cooperated and developed one app, call it the global taxi app. I know I'm brilliant at marketing, Luca, but the global taxi app, I'd download it. But they haven't thought. They're all spending $250,000 on something I will never download. Tesla on September 4th was worth more than these 17 car companies combined. If you don't think electrification and autonomous vehicles are going to change the $10 trillion a year transportation market, this slide's for you.
Inconceivable!
For all you Princess Bride fans. So some people think, oh, EVs are way too expensive. This is a $5,000 EV. It is the #1 selling EV in China that you have never heard about. It's the #2 selling EV globally. It's $5,000. You know who likes it? Women under 35. In fact, they'll, in some cases, spend as much customizing it with Pokemon Go on it and everything else as they do on the car. It only goes 62 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour, but if you're in Beijing, you never get to go 100 kilometers an hour. You're going 5 kilometers an hour all the time, so who cares? It's actually a 4-seater. Do you know that in North America, 50% of employees are millennials and Gen Zs, and by 2025, it'll be 75%? Think about this. If you're a millennial, you can't afford a home. You live in your mother's basement. You can't afford a car. Is that your son or daughter? You can't afford a car. And so what do you value? You value experience. So the CEO of Airbnb, do you know that 25% of all Airbnb stays now are a month or more? So Airbnb said, hey, you can come work for us, and you can go live in any one of the 170 countries that we're in for 90 days. You have to coordinate. So you want to go live in Vietnam, go live in an Airbnb in Vietnam and work with your team in North America, or Sweden, if that's where you work with Airbnb. And then in another 90 days, go live in Germany, and then in South Africa, and then come to Toronto. If you're a millennial and you feel you're never going to have any life, this is experience. Do you know that 1 million people looked about joining Airbnb in 7 days after this announcement? Do you think millennials and Gen Zs are hungry for a rich life experience? Companies that are mobile-centric have an 825% higher value on IPO than companies with no mobile presence. 825%. How big do the signs have to be that we have to be mobile-centric, mobile first? Because a mobile is the Swiss Army knife of modern-day life for a millennial or a Gen Z. They can't live without their mobile. You know, for them, it's photos, gaming, texting, sexting, music. They do everything on their mobile. So are you there? Are 100% of your products mobile? If not, that's one reason you're not reaching this market. Do you know that if you go back to 1980 and look at all this consumer electronic value and add it all up, there is $1 million of 1980 consumer electronic value embedded for free in my $1,000 smartphone. This is a supercomputer that's more powerful than the supercomputer in 1998 that IBM had that beat Garry Kasparov in chess, and that was $100 million. And I have it for $1,000 in my hip pocket, or your customers in their purse. The rate of change is accelerating. It took 68 years for the airline industry to reach 50 million customers, and it took Pokemon Go 19 days. So my question to you is your organization changing as fast as the market is changing, as customer demands are changing, as millennial expectations are Gen Z? And if not, disaster is imminent. Really, what we need to do is look at these trends and identify disruptions before they happen.
Jim Harris.
Jim Harris.
Mr. Jim Harris.
Hi, my name's Jim Harris.
Jim is principal at Strategic Advantage, where he works with Fortune 500 companies and organizations like Barclays Bank, IBM, Canon, MasterCard, Johnson & Johnson, the list goes on.
So today I want to talk about reimagining healthcare.
And I'm going to be talking about drones today.
I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence as it relates to autonomous vehicles.
We have survived farm automation, but what is certain is jobs changed, companies had to change, society as a whole had to change. And so really, this is a story not about the technology, in this case, generative AI. It's a story about change. It's a story about innovation.